You probably grew up hearing that good things come to those who wait, that kindness always wins, that if you play fair, the universe will reward you. But what if that's only half the truth? What if, deep down, you've always sensed that the people who rise, who thrive, who command respect, aren't always the kindest or the most virtuous, but the most strategic? Maybe you've been there. You worked harder than everyone else, stayed loyal, avoided office politics, and still, someone less competent but more cunning took the promotion. You stayed honest in a friendship, but they lied, manipulated, and walked away unscathed. You tried to be the bigger person in a conflict only to be made the fool. There comes a moment, sometimes quietly, sometimes with a crash, when you realize the world doesn't always reward virtue. It rewards results, and results often come from those who know when to play clean and when to play dirty. Not malicious, not cruel, but sharp, calculated, strategic. This isn't a license to become a villain. It's a wake-up call to stop being prey. Because somewhere between naivete and sociopathy, there's a path of power with integrity, a way to protect your softness without being devoured, a way to play the game without losing your soul. And no one understood this better than Niccolò Machiavelli. Born in 15th century Florence during one of the most brutal and politically unstable periods in European history, Machiavelli wrote not from theory, but from experience. His name has become synonymous with manipulation and ruthlessness. But that's only part of the picture. Machiavelli wasn't heartless. He was honest. Brutally honest about how power works, about what people actually do, not just what they should do. And his insights still strike a nerve today, because the truth is, we're still caught in the same tension, how to be good, in a world that often rewards those who aren't, how to protect our values, without being sacrificed at the altar of them, how to live wisely instead of naively. So in this video, we are going to explore what it really means to play dirty, and why it might just be the thing that saves you. Not to become someone else, but to reclaim the parts of yourself you've been taught to suppress. This isn't about turning into a villain. It's about becoming a sovereign, and it starts by finally being honest, with the world and with yourself. Are you ready to stop being the nice one who always loses? To understand why learning to play dirty is sometimes necessary, we need to peel back the layers of how power has operated through time, how survival, influence, and leadership have always been shaped not by virtue alone, but by perception, strategy, and control. Let's begin with the man who gives this discussion its sharpest edge, Niccolò Machiavelli. Born in 1469 in Florence, Machiavelli served as a diplomat during one of the most volatile times in European history. Italy was not a unified country then, but a patchwork of constantly warring city-states, manipulated by the likes of the Medici family, the French crown, and the papal state. Alliances shifted like quicksand. Betrayals weren't rare. They were expected. To survive, let alone lead, you couldn't afford to be just good. You had to be aware. After falling out of political favor and being exiled, Machiavelli wrote The Prince, a book that many misinterpret as a celebration of deceit, but it's more complex than that. He was writing a survival manual for leaders navigating treacherous waters. The Prince is not about being evil. It's about being effective. He famously wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." On the surface, it's cold. But Machiavelli wasn't prescribing tyranny. He was diagnosing reality. He saw that too often those who tried to rule with pure goodness were devoured by those who knew how to manipulate perception, strike decisively, and conceal their intentions. What he offered was clarity, not cruelty. He knew that humans are not consistently noble, that trust is fragile, that power invites predators, and that to survive in a world where betrayal, ambition, and hunger for dominance were constant, one had to play a different game. But Machiavelli was hardly the first to observe this truth. Across history and culture, Power has always belonged to those who could bend the rules, without being broken by them. In ancient China, the philosopher Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War, where deception is described not as dishonorable, but essential. Victory belongs to the one who misleads their opponent, who knows when to strike and when to appear weak. In Indian political philosophy, Kautilya's Arthashastra predates Machiavelli by nearly 1,800 years. It teaches rulers how to maintain power through espionage, diplomacy, and, when needed, ruthless pragmatism. It advises kings to act in the interest of the state, even if it means deception or force, not because cruelty is good, but because survival demands wisdom more than purity. In the Islamic Golden Age, thinkers like Ibn Khaldun recognized the cycles of power and corruption. Dynasties rose through strength, only to fall through luxury and naivety. He wrote that successful rulers needed not just justice, but asabiya, a kind of social cohesion that demanded discipline, loyalty, and sometimes severity. Even in the Christian tradition, the serpent in the Garden of Eden was inked only a symbol of evil. It was a symbol of cunning, and Christ himself told his followers, "Be wise as serpents, and innocent as doves." That line is crucial. It doesn't say only be innocent. It says be both, a fusion of heart and strategy. Across cultures, the pattern repeats. Virtue alone isn't enough. To survive, you must know the shadow. To lead, you must see the world not just as it should be, but as it is. Yet, somewhere along the way, particularly in the modern West, we began to glorify innocence over insight. We told ourselves that playing fair would always lead to fair outcomes, that being good would shield us from harm, that by refusing to play the game, we could somehow transcend it. And then, reality hits. We see companies exploiting workers, yet rising in profits, politicians lying, yet winning, colleagues who manipulate, yet advance, friends who smile to your face and sabotage behind your back. And we wonder, what went wrong? The answer isn't that goodness failed. The answer is that goodness without awareness is fragile, and predators don't attack the strong. They hunt the unaware. That's why Machiavelli's message endures, because it's not a celebration of evil. It's a warning about blindness. Today, the world still runs on perception, on narratives, on social currency, on the power of timing, of silence, of saying less and knowing more. Manipulation isn't just for tyrants. It's embedded in marketing, media, politics, even everyday relationships. If you don't recognize it, you're not outside the game. You're just losing it without knowing why. But here's the key distinction. Learning to play dirty doesn't mean becoming corrupt. It means recognizing that power has rules, that kindness must be guarded, that love without boundaries invites violation. And this has never been just about leaders or rulers. This is about you. In every friendship, relationship, workplace, or community, you are navigating invisible dynamics of influence, respect, trust, and power. Whether you like it or not, whether you see it or not. Playing dirty doesn't mean abandoning your values. It means upgrading your awareness. It means knowing that sometimes silence speaks louder than defense, that sometimes the best revenge is no reaction, that not everyone deserves access to your intentions. It means knowing when to be the dove and when to be the serpent. Because the battlefield isn't always outside. It's in the boardroom, the family dinner, the online comments section. And the moment you realize that, you stop asking for fairness and start mastering the terrain. You realize that morality isn't the absence of power, it's the right use of it. And this is where the real work begins. We must now look deeper, not just at history, but at human psychology. Why are we drawn to the idea of fairness, yet so often punished by it? Why does the psyche resist strategy and cling to purity? What drives our aversion to power, and how does that keep us weak? To answer that, we need to step into the world of modern psychology, into the patterns, traumas, and social norms that shape our discomfort with influence, and our inability to see the hidden games all around us. We need to explore how shadow, shame, and survival instinct all intersect in the human mind. And most importantly, we need to learn how to reclaim power not by betraying ourselves, but by integrating the parts we've disowned. To understand why many of us resist playing dirty, even when it's the only way to protect ourselves, we have to look not at history, but inward, into the mind, into the hidden layers of conditioning, emotion, and fear that shape our relationship with power. Let's begin with a concept from Carl Jung, the shadow. The shadow is everything we deny in ourselves, every instinct we've been taught to suppress. Aggression, envy, ambition, cunning, sexuality, rage, qualities that make us human, yet are labeled bad, unspiritual, or dangerous. So we bury them. We become nice, polite, harmless, and slowly we become powerless. Because what we repress doesn't disappear. It leaks out, in anxiety, in people-pleasing, in staying silent when we should speak, in enduring manipulation because we're afraid to confront it. Many people would rather be morally pure and quietly miserable than risk being seen as strategic or assertive. Why? Because from a young age we're conditioned to believe that goodness equals acceptance, especially if you were the sensitive one, the peacemaker, the empath. Maybe you learned that speaking up led to punishment, that drawing boundaries made others angry, that winning made others envious, and so you chose safety over strength. But the psyche is not designed to be one-dimensional. The more we suppress our darker instincts, the more they control us from the shadows. Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is how the nice person becomes a victim of their own denied power. Psychologically, this dynamic is reinforced by social scripts, shared beliefs about how we should behave. For example, the belief that power is inherently corrupt, that manipulation is always evil, that morality and strategy cannot coexist. But these are myths, and dangerous ones, because when you believe power is bad, you unconsciously give it away. You let others lead, decide, dominate, and you call it humility. But deep down, resentment brews. You become bitter toward those who play the game better than you. You label them fake, narcissistic, toxic. And yet, part of you envies their freedom, their influence, their results. This inner conflict is what Jung called projection, seeing in others what you cannot face in yourself. It's not just philosophy. It's neuroscience too. The amygdala, our brain's threat detector, evolved to prioritize social belonging. For most of human history, being cast out from the tribe meant death. So we developed a survival instinct. Stay likable, avoid conflict, don't threaten others' status. This instinct is still hardwired today, even though the modern world no longer functions like a tribal village. Now, standing out is not a death sentence. It's often the path to success. But our brains haven't caught up. We're still afraid of being disliked, judged, or too much. This is especially true for those with trauma. If you grew up in a home where love was conditional, where you had to earn safety by being good, quiet, or invisible, then power will always feel like a threat. Not just out there, but inside yourself. You'll sabotage your own success. You'll reject leadership opportunities. You'll soften your opinions, hide your confidence, mute your vision. Because part of you believes, if I own my power, I'll lose love. If I win, I'll be alone. But healing means realizing that you can be powerful and loved, strategic and kind, discerning and compassionate. In fact, true self-worth means not fearing the discomfort of being disliked, not needing to be approved of to do what's right for you. And this is where we begin to reframe the idea of playing dirty. Playing dirty doesn't mean being cruel or unethical. It means refusing to be naive. It means recognizing manipulation when it happens, and not being afraid to respond with equal precision. It means knowing when to speak in truth and when to move in silence. Let's borrow a term from evolutionary psychology: game theory. Game theory is the study of strategic decision-making in competitive environments. It shows us that cooperation works best when there's mutual respect and when exploitation is punished. Think about that. Cooperation thrives not because people are always good, but because there are consequences for being bad. This mirrors Machiavelli's insight that stability often requires the appearance of virtue, while being prepared to act decisively when betrayed. Modern psychology echoes this. In assertiveness training, clients are taught not to be aggressive, but not to be passive either. Assertiveness is the middle ground, where you respect others and yourself. You set clear boundaries. You communicate your needs. You don't seek approval, but you don't crush others either. In therapy, we also work with something called self-authority, the ability to make decisions from your own center, not from fear or people-pleasing. All of these are forms of playing dirty, if we define dirty as refusing to stay small. But here is a deeper truth. Most people don't want power because it comes with responsibility. If you have power, you can no longer blame others. You can no longer play the victim. You become the author of your story, and that is terrifying for the part of you that wants to stay safe. So we hide behind virtue, behind perfectionism, behind the myth that if we just do everything right, the world will reward us. But the world doesn't reward goodness. It rewards clarity. People follow those who embody strength and vision, not those who constantly apologize for their existence. And this is where emotional intelligence becomes a superpower. Because real influence is not about domination, it's about discernment. It's about knowing how to read a room, manage emotions, anticipate outcomes, and respond rather than react. It is about noticing the manipulation in someone's words and choosing whether to call it out or outmaneuver it. It's about choosing when to bend the truth, when to walk away, when to speak boldly, and when to play the long game. This is not cruelty. This is wisdom in action. It's the part of you that knows, I don't have to be ruthless to win, but I do have to be awake. And here's the paradox. The more you integrate your shadow, the less likely you are to abuse power. Because when you've made peace with your darker instincts, they stop controlling you. You don't need to manipulate unconsciously. You don't lash out from repression. You don't cling to superiority. You lead with groundedness. You protect with grace. You become what Machiavelli secretly admired, not the tyrant, but the wise ruler, the one who understands both virtue and strategy, compassion and calculation, love and limits, the one who doesn't just react to the world, but reshapes it. There is a moment in every person's life when the mirror starts to lie. You look into it, and you do not recognize the person staring back, not because they have changed too much, but because you have changed too little. You are still playing by rules written for someone else, still following scripts handed down to you by parents, teachers, religion, or culture. Scripts that told you, do not make waves, do not be selfish, do not fight back. But deep inside, something stirs, something ancient, something watchful. A voice that says, this is not working anymore. That voice is your inner strategist waking up. Not the manipulator, not the cynic, but the part of you that knows life is not a rehearsal. This moment is a psychological pivot point, what Jung might call the emergence of the shadow's potential, the raw, unrealized energy inside you that has been locked behind shame and politeness for far too long. You start asking dangerous questions. Why do I let people talk over me? Why do I shrink when I should speak? Why do I keep giving power to people who would not do the same for me? And when you really sit with those questions, not with self-blame, but with honest observation, you begin to see the quiet truth of your life. You have been trained to survive, not to win. the myth of the hero, and the forgotten role of the trickster. We live in a world that worships the hero. We are told to be brave, pure, and unshakable. But every real hero's journey also involves another figure, the trickster. In mythology, the trickster is not evil. He is the one who disrupts the story, breaks the rules, exposes the flaws in the system. Loki, Hermes, Anansi, Raven, Coyote, even Prometheus. The trickster shows us that cleverness can be a virtue, that bending the rules is not always a sin. It is sometimes a form of survival. He reminds us the world is not fair, so we must become wise. And that is where your real growth begins, not when you become morally perfect, but when you learn to dance with complexity. From passive idealism to active agency. Too many of us are stuck in passive idealism. We wait for good things to happen to good people. We expect loyalty to be rewarded, transparency to be honored, effort to be enough. But, as you have probably learned, life does not hand you what you deserve. It gives you what you negotiate, what you claim. And this is where the emotional struggle begins, because claiming power often feels wrong. It feels like betraying the inner child who just wanted peace, or the inner caregiver who just wants harmony, or the inner believer who still clings to a just world. But this guilt, it is misplaced, because learning to play strategically, learning to walk away, to influence, to defend yourself, to use silence instead of explanations, is not cruelty. It is maturity. It is the shift from reaction to response, from martyrdom to measured strength, from innocence to integration. Why this feels so personal? Let us pause for a moment. This topic? It hits hard for a reason. It is not just about politics or business or relationships. It is about your very identity. Because if you have spent your whole life being told that being good means being agreeable, accommodating, emotionally open, and non-threatening, then anything that even resembles assertiveness will feel like violence. You will start setting boundaries and feel like a monster. You will say no and feel guilt. You will prioritize your well-being and feel selfish. But none of that is true. That discomfort you feel, it is not proof that you are doing something wrong. It is proof that you are growing beyond the version of you that was created to survive in a world that no longer serves you. You are not abandoning your values. You are refining them, rooting them in power, not passivity, learning to play dirty without losing your soul. Let us be very clear. We are not advocating for manipulation, deception, or cruelty. That is not strength. It is insecurity dressed up as dominance. What we are talking about is this: knowing when to speak and when to wait. Knowing how to read the room instead of always showing your cards. Knowing how to navigate systems without needing constant validation. Knowing how to use emotional intelligence not just for connection, but for strategy. You do not have to be ruthless to survive, but you do have to stop being naive. And most importantly, you have to stop thinking your value lies in being liked by everyone, because the more you grow, the more you will realize. Being liked is often the price you pay for being effective. When you begin to change, so does everything else. As this transformation deepens, something else begins to happen. Your relationships shift. People who used to have power over you feel uneasy. Those who benefited from your silence might pull away. You will be accused of being different, distant, cold. That is okay, because the truth is, you are not becoming colder. You are just less available to people who mistook your kindness for compliance. And, in their place, new connections will form. People who respect your boundaries. People who see your strength and are not threatened by it. People who do not just want your light, but can handle your fire. Because fire is not just destructive, it is clarifying. It burns away illusion. It reveals what is real. And in that fire, something sacred is forged, your new identity. No longer the victim, no longer the bystander, but the strategic self, the integrated adult, the lion who learned how to be a fox when necessary. Final reflection. Take a breath. Let all of this sink in. Maybe you are at the beginning of this journey. Maybe you have already walked through some of its storms. Either way, you are not wrong for wanting more than peace. You are not wrong for wanting to protect your energy, to move with intention, to stop giving away your power in the name of being liked. You are evolving, and evolution is never comfortable, but it is always sacred. So next time you feel the old guilt creeping in, remind yourself you are not betraying who you were. You are becoming who you needed to be all along, powerfully, strategically, with clarity and compassion, not because it is easy, but because your survival and your sovereignty depends on it. When goodness becomes a trap. Let's talk about what happens when you refuse to play the game, when you convince yourself that staying above it all, that being morally pure, endlessly kind, and never confrontational is the key to peace. You don't just become good, you become exhausted, you become small, you become invisible in a world that rewards visibility. Because no matter how noble your intentions are, the world does not operate on the currency of goodness alone. It moves by power, leverage, perception, and control. And if you don't learn how to manage those forces, they will manage you. You've probably seen this in your own life. The colleague who lies and climbs higher. The friend who manipulates and still gets what they want. The partner who gaslights you into silence. The boss who wears a charming mask and leaves chaos behind the scenes. And you, what do? You stay kind. You hope karma will notice. You tell yourself it's not worth stooping to their level. But here's the truth. When you don't understand how to protect your power, you end up handing it over to anyone who does. And slowly, a pattern forms. One that shapes not just your relationships, but your identity. You begin to shrink. You second-guess yourself in conversations. You smile when you want to scream. You work harder for less recognition. You become the one who smooths over tension while others cause it. And somewhere inside, a voice grows bitter. A voice that says, "Why do I keep losing? Why do I keep attracting users? Why do manipulators always win?" But this voice isn't bitterness. It's your buried self-respect, clawing its way to the surface. Let's call it what it is. The cost of not understanding power is self-betrayal, psychological collapse, and the loss of boundaries. In psychological terms, this is what happens when you live without a strong internal sense of agency, the belief that you have the right and ability to influence outcomes. When your agency is weak, your boundaries dissolve. And boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They let the right people in and keep the wrong ones out. Without them, you absorb everyone else's energy, demands, and manipulation. Over time, this leads to burnout, anxiety, depression, even physical illness. The nervous system doesn't lie. If you're constantly in environments where you must perform goodness to feel safe, your body stays in a chronic stress response. You're not relaxed, you're hypervigilant. You're not peaceful, you're dissociated. You're not compassionate, you're scared. And fear, repressed for too long, turns to shame. Shame that says, "I must be weak. I must deserve this. Maybe I'm just not cut out for power." But this isn't a personal failing. It's a social disease. We've been taught a myth, especially those socialized as nice, that if you just work hard, stay kind, and stay quiet, life will reward you. That people will just see your value and act accordingly. But people don't see your value unless you embody it. And value is not just in your kindness. It's in your ability to protect what you've built. This is the Machiavellian paradox. Those who fear power are often ruled by it. Not because they lack character, but because they lack clarity. They've been taught to hate the tools that could actually liberate them. Historical echoes. The fate of the naive. Throughout history, the naive have always suffered the most. Think of Socrates, executed not for harming others but for refusing to play the political game in a city unraveling with insecurity. Think of Anne Boleyn, intelligent and strategic, but ultimately outmaneuvered by deeper forces in Henry VIII's court. Think of any idealist revolutionary, often undone not by their vision, but by their failure to anticipate betrayal. Idealism without strategy is vulnerability, and Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. His prince does not enjoy cruelty. He uses it sparingly, with foresight. He doesn't seek war, but he prepares for it. He doesn't lie constantly, but he knows when the truth is a weapon against himself. He does not hate power. He respects it. And that's the shift we must make, from fearing power to respecting its rules. Because when you respect something, you learn how to use it. You don't have to dominate. You don't have to become a villain. But you do have to stop playing the role of the perpetual innocent. Innocence may be beautiful in a child, but in an adult, it becomes dangerous. Not just to you, but to those who depend on you. If you're a parent and you can't say no, your children suffer. If you're a leader and you can't fire someone toxic, your team suffers. If you're in love and you can't speak hard truths, your relationship suffers. In every area of life, playing too nice eventually leads to decay. The quiet collapse of potential. But maybe the saddest consequence isn't what you lose externally. It's what dies internally. Your vision shrinks. Your boldness fades. You stop dreaming big because you no longer believe you can protect your dreams. You stop leading, speaking, asserting. You become a ghost in your own life. This is how we lose our genius. Not through laziness, not through failure, but through fear of conflict. We forget that every breakthrough in history came from someone who understood when to be gentle and when to be ruthless. Someone who didn't apologize for being sharp, strategic, and deeply human. Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't just peaceful, he was politically cunning. Joan of Arc didn't just pray, she went to war. Nelson Mandela didn't just forgive, he outmaneuvered apartheid's psychological stranglehold. They played the game, but on their terms, with soul and with steel. And that's what's possible for you, but only if you stop waiting for life to be fair. Stop waiting for the world to give you permission. Stop clinging to the illusion that being liked is more important than being respected, because your life will not be defined by how much you pleased others. It will be defined by how honestly, how fiercely, and how wisely you showed up, especially when it was hard. Playing dirty does not mean losing your soul. It means reclaiming it. Let us clear something up right away. Playing dirty does not mean being cruel. It does not mean abandoning your values. It does not mean turning into a manipulative, power-hungry machine. It means understanding the game you are already in, and choosing to stop being its most naive player. Because the game is happening, whether you acknowledge it or not. So, this is about conscious power, strategic empathy, intelligent self-protection. It is about growing the parts of you that have stayed too soft, too long, not to harm, but to hold your ground. Let us explore how to do that. 1. Know your inner shadow, the parts you have repressed. Carl Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Your first step is not learning how to outmaneuver others. It is learning how you sabotage yourself. Ask yourself, where do I suppress my anger instead of using it to set boundaries? Where do I seek validation instead of impact? When have I chosen silence over self-respect? These are not flaws. These are your hidden muscles, asking to be trained. Journaling can be a powerful practice here. Try this prompt. What am I pretending not to know about the games I play? This awareness is your new foundation, because you cannot play wisely until you see the entire board, including the parts of yourself you have been afraid to own. 2. Redefine power from domination to discernment. Most people have a cartoonish view of power. They think it means being loud, aggressive, or morally compromised. But true power is quiet, precise, clean. It is knowing when to speak and when to wait, when to reveal your hand and when to hold it, when to walk away, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. One useful tool here is assertive communication, not passive, not aggressive, assertive. For example, instead of saying, "I guess it is fine," say, "That does not work for me." Instead of over-explaining, try silence. Let discomfort do the talking. Your tone matters. Calm is power. You do not have to prove anything. Just mean what you say and say it clearly. 3. Practice strategic disengagement. Machiavelli understood a brutal truth. Some battles are not worth winning. Sometimes power means walking away from people who drain your energy, no matter how long you have known them. Sometimes it is staying silent while others expose themselves through their own behavior. You do not need to confront every slight. You do not need to rescue everyone in pain. You need to conserve energy for the battles that build your life. Practice this. When faced with manipulation, instead of reacting, ask, "What is the cost of getting involved?" If someone constantly tests your boundaries, do not explain them again. Enforce them once, then leave. Emotional detachment is not cruelty. It is clarity. 4. Study the rules of influence. You do not need to become a master manipulator, but you do need to stop being the only one in the room who does not understand influence. Here are a few timeless principles. People respond more to how you make them feel than what you say. Use warmth and gravity. Make people feel seen, but do not overshare. Never show all your cards. Let your goals be known only to those who help you execute them. Keep mystery. It creates leverage. Control the frame. If you do not define how people see you, they will project their own fears onto you. Lead the narrative. This is not manipulation. It is emotional intelligence. Use it ethically, but use it. 5. Build boundaries like castles, not fences. A fence can be stepped over. A castle has structure, layers, and a gatekeeper. Start seeing your time, energy, and attention as sacred, not optional. Try this practice. On Sunday night, block your week around what nourishes you. Then guard it. Learn the phrase, "That does not align with my priorities right now." No apology, no drama, just truth. Boundaries do not repel the right people. They attract them. They let the world know. This is someone who values themselves. 6. Learn from Sufi and Stoic wisdom. Detach without disconnecting. The Stoics knew that control is internal, not external. They practiced ataraxia, a kind of deep calm that could not be shaken by insult, failure, or flattery. The Sufis went even deeper. They taught, "You think you are a small star, when in fact you contain the whole universe." Together, these teachings offer a powerful balance. Engage fully, but do not be owned by outcomes. Care deeply, but do not attach your identity to other people's approval. You can practice this daily through breathwork, meditation, or even simple presence. Try this. In a tense moment, pause. Inhale slowly. Ask yourself, is this about power or is this about fear? Then respond from your center, not your conditioning. 7. Create a code of strategic integrity. You do not need to become someone you are not. You just need a code, a personal ethic that blends compassion with clarity and kindness with strength. Write it down. For example, I will not betray my own values, but I will not allow others to weaponize them against me. I will walk away before I beg for respect. I will be generous, but I will not be used. This is your internal compass. When you live by it, decisions get easier. Confusion fades, resentment shrinks. You become whole. 8. Forgive yourself for being naive. Maybe you have let people walk all over you. Maybe you have trusted too easily. Maybe you have been scared to step into your power. That is okay. Do not punish yourself for being gentle. That gentleness is not the problem. The problem was thinking it was your only option. Now you know better. You do not have to become hard. You just have to become wise. Wisdom is compassion with teeth. It loves deeply, but it also protects that love. It sees clearly, but it still chooses faith. It plays the game, but it remembers who it is. You do not need to become Machiavelli, but you do need to learn what he knew, that survival in this world takes more than goodness. It takes skill, courage, boundaries. It takes a soul that refuses to be either predator or prey, and instead becomes a lion, wrapped in light. The lion and the light. Let's go back to where we started. You were told that being good would be enough, that if you just worked hard, stayed kind, and kept your head down, life would take care of you. That virtue was its own reward. But the world didn't play along with that story, did it? You watched less capable people rise, louder voices win, boundaries ignored, integrity overlooked. And maybe you started to wonder, was I wrong to play fair? The answer is both yes and no. You were wrong to think fairness was guaranteed, but you weren't wrong to believe in its value. The real problem wasn't your kindness, it was your lack of strategy. Kindness without power becomes martyrdom. Power without kindness becomes tyranny. But kindness with power? That's leadership. The goal isn't to play dirty just for the sake of it. It's to understand the rules so you can stop being played by them. Because once you do, once you learn to say no, hold your frame, use silence, walk away, or even negotiate with the same sharpness others take for granted, you stop feeling like life is happening to you. You start becoming the architect of your days. You start to act, not just react. You begin to choose who you are with clarity, not just hope. And let's be clear, this isn't about winning all the time. It's about not losing yourself every time. That quiet resentment you carry, that inner ache of being unseen, underestimated, taken for granted, it's not because you're too soft. It's because you haven't fully allowed your strength to emerge. You don't have to harden into cruelty. You don't have to abandon your empathy. But you do need to own the part of you that knows how to survive and thrive in a world that wants to always be gentle with you. The historical echo. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for evil. He was warning against naivety. In a time of ruthless politics, fragile alliances, and deadly betrayal, he wrote, "The Prince not as a manifesto for cruelty, but as a guide for survival." He understood that power doesn't reward the most righteous. It rewards the most prepared. And that preparation often means playing a game you wish didn't exist, with skills you were never taught, in a language no one explained. But you're learning now. The modern soul. In today's world, power is more subtle. It doesn't always wear a crown or sit on a throne. It lives in emails, glances, job offers, group chats, silence, charisma, influence. To navigate this world, you don't need to become ruthless. You need to become real, conscious, grounded, awake. You need to be the kind of person who can say, "I see what this is. I know what I'm doing. I trust my choices." That's real power. Not control over others, but sovereignty over yourself. Final thought. You don't owe the world your constant obedience. You owe yourself your full presence, and that includes the parts of you that are strategic, fierce, boundaried, unapologetic. You were never meant to be just nice. You were meant to be whole. So go ahead, play dirty if you have to. But do it with grace. Do it with eyes open. Do it with a heart that knows the weight of both kindness and fire. And above all, do it knowing that your power doesn't make you less human. It makes you finally free. If this spoke to something deep in you, if it unearthed a part of yourself you've tried to silence, the part that's tired of being underestimated, of feeling too soft in a world that rewards the sharp, then you're in the right place. Because here, we don't shame the struggle. We examine it. We honor it. We learn how to rise through it. This space isn't about quick fixes or toxic hustle. It's about cultivating something stronger: emotional intelligence, psychological clarity, and historical depth. It's for those of us who are no longer interested in living on autopilot, who are ready to move from confusion to conviction, from people-pleasing to purpose, from powerlessness to sovereignty. We study Machiavelli, Jung, ancient wisdom, and modern psychology not to sound smart, but to live better, to reclaim the parts of ourselves that got buried under shame, fear, and false humility. Because playing the game doesn't mean losing your soul. It means learning how to move through life with both strategy and integrity. So, if that's what you're seeking, if you're ready to stop feeling guilty for wanting power and start learning how to wield it with awareness, then subscribe. Not just to this channel, but to this journey. This is a space for the misfits with vision, the empaths who've had enough, the thinkers, the feelers, the quiet rebels who are done being ignored. Here, we don't chase perfection. We pursue wholeness, with all its fire, grace, scars, and strength. And if that sounds like home, then we're just getting started. What would your life look like if you truly stepped into your power? What could you create, protect, or walk away from if you stopped apologizing for your strength? Let's find out. Together. Subscribe. Not for more content, but for more clarity, more courage, more of you.